Hi, my friends. My name is Amie Kaufman, and I'm an author of science fiction and fantasy, and a huge fan of the author I am about to introduce you to. It is such a pleasure to be bringing you the launch event for The Blood Traitor, the third book in Lynette Noni's amazing Prison Healer trilogy. Hi, Lynette.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh, it's so good to see your face. And it is bucketing where I am. So this is actually a really nice way to do an event.
Oh, really? Well, we've had
Yep.
about 15 years of rain, so I don't envy you that today.
Yeah. Like our hair is looking spectacularly better than it would in person right now.
Yeah, and I think by the
Yep.
time at the end of our chat, we'll both have expanded. So
Yes, it lives. It has its own life. So
yeah.
before we kick off, we should just quickly acknowledge that we're both coming to you live from the traditional lands of, in my case, the Boonwurrung people, and in Lynette's case, the Gubbi Gubbi people. So we want to pay our respects and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as any other elders who might be watching tonight and those around the country. So, Lynette, I have like a giant list of questions here because I ate these books. I've got my beat up first copy. And I'm about to make everyone really envious. This is how I got to read book 3.
Oh,
Yeah, and you know what? She's a big girl, Lynette. She's a very big girl. I don't know if you noticed when you were writing it.
yeah. Not small, not small.
Not small at all. So, first of all, we're going to say that for those of you who want to grab a copy of the book, you can grab it from Booktopia right now because it is out today. And if you click the link in Booktopia's bio, you can get an extra 10% off the price, which is already discounted. And you can do that through to the end of the month. So I'll remind you again at the end, but head to the link in the bio and make sure that you grab your copy. For now, though, let's get into it. Are you ready for my list of questions?
I am so ready.
All right. We've got quite a few. So for those who need captions, I should also note, this will be going up on YouTube in a few days. And when it does, it will be you'll be able to auto caption it. So insofar as YouTube has any idea what I'm saying, at least, you'll be able to read those. All right. So first up, I've got some specific questions about the books later, but just in case we've got anyone joining us who's new to the trilogy, do you want to give us, the 60-second kind of rundown?
Well, sure. I guess I'll bring it back to the beginning, and that is The Prison Healer. And so this book or this series is about a 17-year-old girl called Kiva who has been locked in a death prison for the last 10 years. And when she's finally given the chance to earn her freedom, the cost could be her very life. So throw in some royals and some rebels and some elemental magical trials that really are quite deadly. And then there's, there's a very slow burn romance. There's a plague. Sorry, everyone. I know we're all sick of plagues right now, but it's a minor part of the plot. So all these things all combine to form a pretty high stakes adventure in a very, very dangerous place.
Yes, high stakes adventure is a very good way to describe it. And we're going to get into that later. But first of all, whenever I get the chance to sit with someone, I always like to rewind the tape to the very start because I'm always fascinated by this. Do you have really early memories of writing or storytelling, or do you have an idea of where this all began for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some of my earliest memories in childhood were storytelling in one form or another. I have an older brother, he's 2 years older than me, and we lived on a farm. And so it was just kind of the both of us. There was no one around for ages. So we would make up stories with our little teddy bears. We'd give them little weddings. We'd do really weird stuff like that. I was always reading. But from a writing perspective, my mother dug out this story that I wrote back. I was so young, and it's again, I was living on a farm, and so it's called Cats Stay at the Beach, and it's an illustrated book. And because to me, a beach was such a mythological place. I'd never been.
Yeah.
I knew
you want an adventure,
exactly.
A quest to the beach.
Exactly.
I love that.
So I took this cat and it went to the beach, and I drew. My illustration skills have not gotten much better since when I was 4 or whenever I wrote it. Hopefully my writing skills have, but Cat had a great day at the beach that day.
Oh, that utterly delights me on several levels, not the least of which is that my first recorded, written and illustrated story is about a white seal called Shawala who saved his people from a massacre and led them to, I don't know, some kind of promised land where they moved in and became roomies with a monster.
Okay, that is amazing. But even just the next level creativity of it, the fact that you didn't call your white seal was already much beyond what I did. So
I just like that mine was running from Bloodbath and yours was like the purest possible adventure. I feel like
just wanted a day at the beach.
Yeah, the dream. Everything everyone needs to know about us right there.
Yeah,
but you learned to write horrible, terrible, heartbreaking things. You were just warming up with Kat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I never finished Kat's story. Maybe Kat died on the way back from the beach. We'll never know.
Oh my God. The dark sequel, Kat, roadkill.
Yep. Or Kat met like Shark. I don't know. Anything could have happened on those in-between pages.
I'm quite confident that already someone behind the scenes at Booktopia is being like, I didn't see this going this way, but oh well, buckle in. This is what happens when we put them together. But, okay, so talking about ideas, do you remember the specific spark? Was there something for this series that kicked you off?
Yeah, and I can't say that for all of my books. I don't know if you can for yours, but this one, it was such a I know. Sometimes you have to like, what was the inspiration behind that? Like, it was.
Do ideas come from?
Yeah. But with The Prison Healer, it was very clear to me. I was actually over at Scribblers Festival, which is a children's literary festival in Perth. Great festival. I was there. It was the middle of 2019, and I had a day off in between the festival, and everyone said you should go out and visit Fremantle Prison, which is a heritage listed site now. There's no inmates or anything now. And so I went to the prison, and while I was there, they had this underground tunneling tour because when there were prisoners there, they had to dig beneath the ground to create a water source for the prison and then later for the township of Fremantle. And so I went down these terrifying ladders deep into the bowels of the earth, and I walked through these some of these tunnels that were dry, and then I hopped in a little paddle boat and I canoed through ones that had were partially submerged, and I was in the boat like paddling, and our guide was like, let's turn up the lights and see what it was like for prisoners who like their little everything went out. And so it was pitch black, drifting along this water source, no sound, no sense of any kind. It was terrifying. I felt like I was the only person in the world, or I felt like I had died and just didn't know. And I just remember thinking, I need to write, like, the amount of, I'm just feeling so much. There was so much injustice that I felt through the walls. There was so much danger. There was so much sadness and despair and just everything that I felt in that moment. I need to write something in a setting like this. And so I actually went back and did a night tour that night. It was a ghost tour, but I missed all the scares because I was busy taking notes of like all the different, prison. And once I was on the plane on the flight back, which is about a 5-hour flight back, I just started drafting and coming up with ideas for this story. So that was how The Prison Healer was conceived. Wow.
That's such a cool spark. And you certainly, what's really interesting to me is sometimes you stray a long way from the spark, but you set out to write a story about, what it means to have prisons like this. And you did.
It was crazy. Yeah. It was great because the world building was really there. And I wanted, after writing, like, the Medoran Chronicles is a 6-book series set in multiple worlds. And so I had so much creative freedom in my brain. And then with the Whisper duology, it was set in the real world in Sydney, and it kind of really restricted what I could do. And so I wanted to challenge myself in a new way with The Prison Healer, like reopen that fantasy world element, but really kind of suck it back to just the world would be the prison. So I had to create like a little space within this larger space, which was then really delightful to me to then go into the second book and be able to go beyond that and to stretch my, world building skills again and go beyond the walls and everything. But creating that world within a world with the first book it was a lot of fun, and it was really enjoyable to challenge that and to think about what might be in a prison environment and what the workers would be doing and where they'll be laboring and all the different kind of places. So it was great.
And I enjoyed that expanding a lot because, I always think that, when you're both writing and reading a trilogy, you should, in book one, things should feel as bad as they can be. And then in book two, you should look back on book one and be like, oh, my sweet summer child. And, then by book three, you should be looking back on the book one trials and being like, look, I'm not saying it wasn't very challenging, but like this here is a real problem. And being able to actually expand, literally the world gives you this opportunity to bring it, to change the scale of what's going on with each book. How did you, I had a question about, I guess, writing, because you've written such a long series, and as you said, such a short constricted duology as well. How did you find the trilogy in terms of sort of planning it? Do you plan, or do you just write Once Upon a Time and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird question for me to answer, because I feel like every book or every series has such a different process to me. With the Medoran Chronicles, I was very much not a planner. I was very much a pantser. So for those watching, that means I wrote by the seat of my pants. I had no idea what I was doing. I would have a few key plot points that I knew I wanted to hit, and a few key moments, usually a beginning and an ending, but anything else is kind of free game. Then going into Whisper, I kind of started to merge a little bit. I knew there would be more like plot twist kind of things, and I wanted to plan a little bit more for those. And so I had a bit of a hybrid process for that. But coming into The Prison Healer, I was pretty much moved to a very plotting mindset, and I spent most of that plane ride that I mentioned, coming up with key points that I wanted to have happen in this series. And so writing that was really interesting, because I was able to do that in the first book. But as you would know, Amy, when you sign on with new publishers, they want a synopsis for the whole series. And so you have to then come up with what's happening in the next, for me in this case, 2 books, which is a delight. I'm sure you love this aspect of our job. But it's really funny. So I sat down and I was really meticulous in planning the next 2 books. But something happened when I went into writing the second book, and a few of the characters went off and made some changes that weren't in line with my plans. And so by the time I came into the third book, everything had to change. And I, even now I look back at that synopsis and I'm like, literally nothing, including the ending, is what I set out
there.
So,
I have some suspicions about what might have changed, so I'm going to ask you about it in a bit, as non-spoilery a way as we can. But yes, I very much know what you're saying. This is why I am now famous for selling my second book in book 2, things get considerably worse.
Yes, I mean, something bad happens and the characters have to deal with it. That's all we can really say.
I mean, this is every story that's ever lived, right? When I'm teaching people to write pitches for books, I always say every story that ever lived is, when event happens to person, they must action before consequence.
Yes.
That's every story ever.
Yeah, I mean, what more do people need? I mean, that's
right. I'm like, there'll be a real bad event. The action will be dashing. The consequence will be serious.
Yeah, and people will feel it. They will really feel it.
There'll be lots of feelings, for sure. For sure. All right. I'm going to get specific in a minute. But first of all, I mean, you wrote this trilogy through, you had the idea in 2019, little knowing what was about to fall on our heads over the next few years. And so you've written the series quite quickly, and you've done it through a time when I know a lot of people had an enormous amount of trouble creating, and I expect you felt the same as the rest of us. But how did you find it writing over the last couple of years, to deadline?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you can certainly speak to this as well. It's very pot kettle with your own hideous deadlines. I don't know a single person, and certainly don't know a single creative who hasn't struggled in these times. It's, we've all had to, we've all had to find a way to adjust. We've all had to find a way to try and just keep going and like dig into something deeper in us that we may not even have known was there. And so this series, it was really, for a lot of reasons, it was really hard. A lot of the themes and a lot of the things the characters go through, especially in this final book, they were darker moments, and writing them during particularly dark moments in my own life just amplified whatever I was going through personally. So it was just like, there were times when it was just really, really difficult. But at the same time, one of the biggest I guess messages in this series is that of surviving and of hoping even when there seems like there's no hope, and of just, I guess, getting that fighting spirit and keeping trying. And so all of that, it had almost like a subliminal messaging into like me as I wrote, to just keep going, just one more chapter, just, another word some days, just do what you need to do. And thankfully, I was so, like, the thing that probably helped me the most was that I really, by the end, I was really in love with these characters enough that I was desperate to see how, especially because my plot had gone out the window, I was desperate to see how things would turn out for them.
Yeah, there you go, writers. The author was as excited as you were to know what was going to happen.
Yes, I was very anxious, everyone. There was a few moments where it was touch and go I was just like, no, this is not right. So,
well, I feel like given what you do to them, it's only fair.
I know. And I get, you would have this as well. We have readers who, scream and throw things and everything. I'm like, imagine having to write that, guys. Like, we feel you.
Yeah, you got to read it in 10 seconds. I had to edit it 18 times.
Yeah,
worse every time. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're getting much of a sympathy vote here, but we can try for it.
Yeah, we can try.
Yeah. And how does it feel now it's done?
Oh, I mean, you would also know this, but I mean, it's such a bittersweet feeling to finish a series, isn't it? It's like you have like the elation of knowing it's done. Hopefully you have the contentment and the satisfaction of it being like something you're proud of or something you're happy with, or at least not, hating. But it's also really sad because you're saying goodbye to, characters who fallen in love with, or a world that you've really, fallen into. So yeah, I'm at that. I have all the emotions right now. There's all the joy, and there's all all the almost like a missing them kind of feeling, and it's just and it's a whole spectrum. I mean, what do you feel when you finish a series?
It's funny. I mean, I think like this day, launch day, like it's threshold day. It's the day when the story steps out over the threshold into the world and it's not yours anymore. And I hope I think for most writers, it is also the day on which you're able to look at it more as a reader and less as yourself, and just see what you love about it, and see a complete story that you told, rather than going, if you give it back, I could definitely edit it again, because I had always edit it again. I'm in the process right now of having a book wrestled out of my hands by an editor who's like, we all know you could edit it again, love. That's not in question.
Yeah.
Could you edit it again?
Yeah.
But it's this transformational moment, isn't it? Where like today, Kiva and everyone else become everyone's. They're not yours anymore. And that's a weird, sad moment, and also, a moment a lot of people have been excited about and waiting for. So,
and I guess even on that, it's almost a moment of relief, because like you, I assume you're the same, we're kind of perfectionisty in what we want to, create. And so that moment where we literally cannot do anything more because it's done.
It's done.
Out there.
It's typeset.
Yeah, it's like we can just kind of breathe and be like, well, whatever will be, will be. It's now in the reader's hands. They'll love it or they'll hate it. And it's, that's it.
But I've done what I'm extremely confident they're going to love it.
Oh, thank you.
So all right. So I want to ask a few questions about the series, and I think we can do this without hitting spoiler territory. But I want to ask about Cresta, because I have a theory that Cresta might be one of the things that you weren't expecting to happen throughout the series. Like, Cresta became my surprise fave in book 3. I'm usually reasonably good at seeing and knowing how I'm going to feel about characters in advance, but I was unexpectedly won over. I did not see it coming. She was so much fun to read. Can you talk about the writing a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, you are correct. She was a surprise to me. I always knew after the first book, or at least I hoped, I wanted to see her again. I wanted to have more time with her, because we only get a little bit of her in the first one, but she's such a strong character in a sense that she's quite violent. She's really tough as nails. She's not a really pleasant character. And so I wasn't sure what role she would have in the third one, but it really was a case of when you force people together in an environment where they're just stuck together, they'll either kill each other or they'll come to some kind of truce or whatever else. And so Cresta's development, I just loved it. It was like because she was not at all what I had planned, as I wrote her, I got to meet her, and therefore readers got to meet her. And so it was almost like sitting down with someone and trying to get to know their story, getting deeper into the layers of who they are, and then being really surprised at what you find throughout it all. So yeah, I loved, she was a real surprise delight for me as an author. And
I felt like my book 3 experience was with Cresta was about being like, oh, I'm seeing all these new facets of your personality and, who you are. and I'm realizing now that in book one, I just saw a little slice, but it feels completely consistent. It felt like you knew everything. Yeah, well, so this is what I want to ask about, because to me, it felt like you knew everything that was coming. In book one, you just made a deliberate decision to be like, I'm only going to show you this and you're going to think you know, and then later I'm going to show you what you didn't know. But was that happening more instinctively for you?
It probably happened more instinctively as I was writing the second book, which is really interesting because Cresta doesn't have any part in the second book. But as the threads of that story merged from my original plan, and so everything kind of started to shift in another direction. There was, a lot more, the stakes grew beyond what I originally had planned for them to be. And so my brain kind of spiraled into all these different possibilities. And I realized, looking back at the first book, I could go in a couple of different directions with Cresta, and they were already there prepared for me. And so it's either way, I would have had my work cut out for me, but I would have had less work cut out for me if I'd gone in a different direction to how she ended up being. So I had to kind of give her a complete, like you said, I had to give her backstory. There had to be reasons for the way she is. She had to really be fully developed in a way that people could not just, just scoff and be like, yeah, that's unrealistic. It was there had to be a connection point. And so a lot of that, the gears in my head started turning while I was writing the second book on how that might happen. But even up until I really wrote the beginning of the third book, I was still like, I could just make it easier on myself and make her what she was. Or I could try and see if I can go a bit deeper here and see what happens. And
it felt so textured and layered, and it felt deep rooted, which is I think a thing that when we're being readers, we don't always stop and think about, but we know when it's not there.
Yeah,
we know when something's just been tarted up with a quick renovation for quick sale, but this is actually just new handles on the cupboards. It's not really,
it's fresh coat of paint and we're good.
So it certainly felt very pre-prepared and very, very deep rooted. But I don't know, I just somehow had a suspicion that if there was someone who was going to have grown beyond your original envisioning.
Definitely.
So you mentioned earlier that one of the things that inspired you was kind of wanting to talk about the inherent injustice of prisons of the type that you visited, and of all prisons. But I felt like another sort of big theme in the series that goes hand in hand with that was, betrayal and forgiveness. Each of the three books is its own story in different ways of betrayal. And, divided loyalties and, this idea that, betrayal isn't a simple thing. Divided loyalties aren't simple things. There's not good, there's not bad. There's complicated. Was that something that you kind of set out to explore, or did that unfold as you wrote?
I think it was a bit of both. And I say that because when I went into writing The Prison Healer, I knew the ending from the very beginning. And so I knew the complications, if we're going to use that word, the great word. I knew the complications that would then cause going into the second book, which then, of course, then meant I knew exactly how the second book would end and the complications that would then cause. So I knew these key moments of like revelation and betrayal and the choices that these characters would be making for better or for worse. And so I knew I had my work cut out for me in order to make these things happen in a way that worked, but then, come to a conclusion in the final book. And so it's a very fine line, because you don't want to, if someone has done something really, really bad, they need to work for forgiveness. They can't just be easily forgiven. And unfortunately, Kiva coming into the final book, she has a lot of people that she needs to work for.
Give me a list of people she doesn't.
Exactly. I can't think of
really anyone meaningful at all.
Phlox, the silver bear, she didn't really offend him. He's fine, he's good, but he'd probably take offense on behalf of everyone around him. I don't know. But so juggling that in the final book was really a delicate thing, because there had to be some kind of forgiveness to help her not want to just despair that constantly, but then there had to be other people that we take. So that was fun to juggle. But yeah, I think, as you yourself know, writing to young readers, like, people in real world, readers who are reading these books, they are making life choices and they are making mistakes. There's no, like, even no matter what age you are, you have to make decisions in life, and you will often, sometimes, hopefully not too frequently, but you will make the wrong ones. And there are always going to be consequences for that. So I think, I didn't want to shy away from that in these books. I wanted to show that, okay, you make a mistake, you deal with it, but you keep moving forward and you do what you can to try and fix things. So that was kind of probably what my mentality was with the betrayal and forgiveness and that juggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes through beautifully, because you're absolutely right. There's no stage in your life at which you're not weighing things up and making decisions, and sometimes you get them right and sometimes you get them wrong, and sometimes that wrong hurts people, and sometimes you look at those decisions you made and you go, I can't believe that I did that, even knowing why. I can't believe that happened. And as you say, there's only one way out of that, which is, well, there are two, but one of them involves burying your head in the sand.
Yeah.
And,
denial,
the other
and
one,
all the rest, yeah.
right, which, sure, I get the temptation, but I think, we've all been there too. But writing about making that decision, for me, it felt like, books should never preach, because as soon as they do, if nothing else, they're boring and they also don't achieve what they're trying to achieve. But they should ask lots of questions, and it felt like a book that asked lots of questions. What would you do? How would you feel about this behavior? Would you forgive that? What would it take? If it had been you, what would you do? And that's the sort of thing that I think, I love it when something makes me into a reader instead of reading it as a writer. Because we read everything kind of with half an eye on how it was done, and I love books that make me forget that.
Oh, thank you.
All right, speaking of being a reader, cliffhangers.
Oh, yes.
So I know a thing or two about being screamed at.
Yes, you do.
You know a thing or two about it too, I assume.
Yes.
Because you did that, and on behalf of your readers, how dare. That said, they worked beautifully. Like, could you talk a bit about, like, why do you choose cliffhangers? Why do you think they work so well? Why end without talking about, I guess, exactly where you end? Why approach the ending that way?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you. And by that, I mean not thank you for all your cliffhangers, which are, from a reader perspective, hideous. And actually, speaking as a reader, I hate cliffhangers. Like, if I had read my own books, I would hate them. Like, why? Especially when, there's a year or more between releases. It is just awful. But I mean,
so we're the worst. We could accept that.
Yeah, I know they are. I feel like, like, we can admit this. It is an awful thing to read. It's an awful thing for us to make people read, but it is what it is. The fact is that, like, cliffhangers are so powerful. They have, they hopefully with a book you'll get some kind of closure for whatever the problems were in that particular book, but they'll end at this point where there's a whole slew of new problems that you're about to go into that makes you want to keep reading. And I've attempted that with these, not just even at the end of the first two books, but through even just chapter ends through multiple parts of the series.
Those I can forgive, though, because those I can just keep going as you intended.
Yes, well, those are the ones that, just keep people turning another page at night, but at least you can keep turning. But yeah, I just think, I mean, I'm now probably just repeating myself now, but they're so effective to just have people wanting more. And as authors, we want people to want more of our books. So it's kind of like a hashtag sorry, not sorry kind of thing.
It is exactly that. It is exactly that. All right. So think about how to ask this. So there are we've talked about betrayal, but there are lots of secrets in these books. There are lots of secret identities in these books. I think we can say that safely. Even if readers think that they're guessing what we're talking about, they're not. Trust nothing, readers. And you've got kind of this triangle. I'm trying to think how to even describe it. This triangle of, on one hand, following through all of these, mysteries and interpersonal dynamics and betrayals and who's going to find out what. And then the second point is like the non-stop high octane action of questing. And because, essentially we're on a quest. And the third point of it is the romance, is the wanting to constantly scream, oh my God, just have a conversation and make out, while totally accepting that is definitely not an option right now because C points 1 and points 2.
Yeah.
And that, you know, points 1 and all three affect each other, I guess, is what I'm saying, and feed into each other, and each element of the story is made more difficult by the other two. How on earth do you balance that?
I have no idea. I think it was just an awareness in the back of my mind the whole time I was writing it. Okay, we need to be dealing with this, but we also need to be dealing with this. So keep having a reminder about this. And these characters hate each other right now. So we need to try and be building towards this. But we don't want it to be too quick, because then, you know, like, so there was all these things. And then on top of that, the quest that we're speaking of, you know, there's 10 main characters on that quest. So juggling 10 people and giving them all enough screen time that readers are connected enough to each of them that they care about them all in like different ways. So I remember, I actually have a really acute memory of early on, you know, when I was writing going into the quest part, and I went and sat at the beach, and I'm like, I can't juggle 10 characters for this quest. How do I, you know, like, do I just kill off some of them? Do I get rid of some of them? Do I have sense?
Like, you could fill a minibus with the people we're talking about here.
I know. And it was just one of those, like, I was staring out at the ocean, like, not with a cat, by the way. I lived near an ocean now. Yeah.
Did you sense I was about to ask?
Yeah. I'm like, no, didn't take a cat with me. But then I tried to write it, and I tried to write it with less characters. I tried to get rid of a few of them somewhere else. And I assume you as a writer would be very aware of this, but, you know, we have this writerly instinct. It's like a weird kind of feeling. Sometimes you start to write something, you go down a path, and you just feel that it's not right. And I just kept getting redirected back to having all these people, some of them doing different things, so they're not all on page at the same time, but like every time I tried to make it easier for myself, it didn't feel right.
Didn't work.
So that was that's my long way of answering everything else you said before. I just had to really, especially without having a plot to go by anymore, I had to just really trust my instincts to how it felt time-wise, for have these moments, like specific moments of forgiveness from different people. The romance part, which is, you know, like you said, it was scream-worthy, just like you just wanted, you know, you just wanted to get them to cuddle and just be, everyone's happy and fine.
It could be okay, trust me.
Exactly. So that kind of thing, it was just, and then the moments where it really wasn't, and they're just like the, you know, like just awful moments in amongst that. So yeah, it was I want to say it was a fine balance of figuring it out, but it wasn't. I just had to like hyperventilate and trust that I was writing the right thing as I went along. So that was super fun.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, though. It's like when someone says, how do you know when it's done? How do you know what to do? It's like, it's the vibe, Your Honor. I know if I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, that's
if
it.
I'm doing it right, there's just like a low buzz of uncertainty. If I'm doing it wrong, I feel very bad.
Exactly. And it's such a cop-out answer when someone says, how do you know when a chapter is finished? I'm like, I trust my gut. Like, it's like, how do you explain that?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I think the answer is you get it wrong lots and lots and lots and lots. And that slowly helps you triangulate.
Yep.
Like in an ongoing craft way, so that you start to get it right quicker.
Yep.
And then every so often you still get it disastrously wrong and go back and try again, and that's fine too.
Yep. Part of the journey.
Yep. Just finished proofing the now first chapter of the book I'm on at the moment. It's like the 4th version, the 5th version. That book has started a lot of places. Now it starts in the place I think is right.
Yeah.
Hopefully readers think so too.
And it takes that time. It takes those failed attempts for you to finally hit the one that, and they're probably all really great, and readers would not know. That's the thing, but you know, as a writer. So,
well, you know, and I think it goes back to what I was saying before about, on some level as a reader, you know, if something doesn't have deep roots.
Yeah.
You might look at it at first and it looks great, but it's going to fall over in a storm, and you know that.
Yeah.
All right. Without being too specific, is there a moment in book 3 that you're really looking forward to readers reaching? Is there something you can say that they'll go, oh, this is the bit she was looking forward to be reading?
I mean,
that evil woman.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few that, like, some are meaner than others, and some have a different emotional pull for me, or like, there's obviously some good moments that I really love and some really not good moments. I think though that, like, a scene that I loved and hated, and then loved some more and then hated, and then like the whole spectrum of emotions. I'm just going to say it was in a place called the Midnight Markets. So every like the chapters around that kind of area, there was a lot of stuff that happened, and it was just you know, to write it and yeah, stuff happened. And so it's kind of like, yeah, it was very like that was also actually, funnily enough, one of those moments. There was a early on in that there was I wrote a few chapters and I just scrapped them because they didn't fit. Like I wrote the one chapter a few times leading up to whatever, and it didn't work every single time. And then I just had to, even like editorial, I was talking to my editors about it, and you know, they're like, oh, try this, and everything I tried didn't work. And I was like, no, I just have to go with what my gut is saying, and it's this. And it just makes everything so awful. But I really love that entire scene. So
I mean,
welcome.
yeah, okay. So readers, basically, when you find yourself in the Midnight Markets, just feel free to like shake a fist at the sky and be like, Noni.
Yep. That was me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're nearly out of time, but I want to be cheeky on behalf of readers and say, can you give us any little hint as to what's coming next? Even a word or two about what are you thinking about right now, apart from very well-deserved cup of tea and a long nap.
Well, thank you. I am just really, I guess in the moment I am, because the other books in this series released during the pandemic and accelerated schedule, and kind of I missed them. I know that sounds bizarre, but I'm sure you're probably the same, and you kind of it's gone. So I'm being a bit more deliberate with this release to try and stop and give it some space to celebrate it.
Good.
And then it's straight back into the writing cave for me. So I have a couple of different ideas, and I'm I mean, I love it's weird because one of them is another like YA fantasy that I'm really, really excited for, but another one is a little bit of a different direction. And I'm not sure if maybe I want a palette cleanser kind of thing to kind of go that way as like a little bit of a shift gears, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure. So that's been my tug of war brain question for the last little bit to try and figure that out. So I'm going to give myself space with this release, and then I think it'll come back to that instinct, what feels right at the time to write next. So I'm excited. Can't wait.
I love that. All right. Well, if people want to be, I guess, the first ones to start hearing about it, where can they find you online? What's the best way to follow you?
Social media, I'm just at Lynette Noni. I'm probably the most active on Instagram, I would say. I'm terrible. Twitter is a cesspool of humanity. No offense to people who like Twitter. I think most people can agree it's not the nicest place, but I am. Yeah, I retweet or whatever. And I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok, which is mostly hate, but I get, I fall down the TikTok hole. But yes, Instagram is my happy place. I follow dogs and like slime accounts and, and cake decorating. And so I'm on there a lot more than anywhere else.
Yeah. Have you tried cottage gardens? Also very calming.
No, what is this? Like
just nice people with nice little cottages with really nice flowers that they'll tell you about with great enthusiasm.
I'm gonna have to make a note of that and look that up. I need
CC readers, we also need this calming down time after we suffer for you to suffer.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, we all need those Zen moments.
Yes, it's true. Okay, well, before we go, we're going to remind everybody that right now, if you click on the link in the bio, you can get 10% off what is already a reduced price for the Blood Traitor at Booktopia. So even if you are not caught up on the series, now is the perfect time to buy it for cheap and stack it up. And I'm just saying, now is the extra time to do what I do all year round, which is just like grab an extra one, put it aside, and then come holiday season, be like, thank you, past self. All my presents are taken care of. I shall gift this to somebody that I love or somebody I would like to see suffer, or both.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. We're out of time, but Lynette, happy launch day. I really hope that you are taking that moment to pause and enjoy it, because a trilogy is a huge achievement and you deserve it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this. And your questions were amazing. And everyone go check out Amy's books as well. I've been a fan of yours since you debuted. So I read everything you write. So thank you for being an awful, awful cliffhangers, awful everything.
Terrible influence.
Yep.
All right. Well, everyone, good night. Off you go. Start reading.
Bye.